Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Nikichi Taifa, and welcome to the Reparation Information Thought Series, a periodic strategic webinar featuring reparations experts, racial justice thought leaders, and you engaged in critical discussion, reflection, and analysis on issues pertinent to the movement for reparatory justice in the United States and abroad. It is co-hosted by the Reparation Education Project and the National Black Cultural Information Trust. And at this time, I want to call upon my colleague, Jessica Ann Mitchell-Aruwar, the mover and shaker, the executive director, NBCIT, to tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Thanks, Nikichi. Hi, everyone. I'm Jam Iwuyor, founder of the National Black Cultural Information Trust. We share information, news, and resources that uplifts the collective freedom of Black communities, including pushing back on cultural myths and disinformation that impacts our communities.
And this is Nikichi Taifa with the Reparation Education Project, or REP, is what I characterize as a new organization with deep roots. Our principals, myself, and our project director are longstanding representatives in the United States reparations movement, myself having been involved in reparations movement building since the 1970s, early 70s, long before it became popular and trendy, who sat at the feet of reparationist icons such as Queen Mother Audley Moore and President Mario Bedelli. And our program director is a past national co-chair of NCOBRA, as well as co-chair of his current local DC chapter. So basically, in sum, Reparation Education Project conducts presentations and trainings of reparations to nonprofit organizations, educational and faith institutions, businesses, and celebrity influences, philanthropy, and private estates. And we provide technical assistance upon request to federal, state, and municipal government. We are really thrilled to kick off our fall webinar series, Reparation Information Thought Series, with a Fireside Chat with Dr. Cheryl Grills. But before we introduce that, we want to also just kind of give you a feel for what is coming up with respect to our series this fall. And it's right there on your screen. Today is the Fireside Chat. Mark your calendars, please, for Tuesday, October the 17th. We're going to have a discussion on reparations. What do Black folk want? Our panelists will be my colleague there, Jessica Ann Mitchell-Aruwar, as well as Kabibi Tayimba, who's the project director for Reparation Education Project. On Thursday, October the 26th, we're going to be featuring millennial activists in the reparations movement, and we're going to hear what they have to say. And our panelists for that will be Nicole Carty from Get Free, Trevor Smith, the Narrative Power Incubator, Dreesen Heath, reparationist consultant, Queen AF, the chair of the NCOBRA Chicago chapter, Kevin Cosney, who is with the California Black Power movement, and invited also Sister Lily X, who's chair of the youth division of NCOBRA. On Friday, November 3rd, we're going to have another Fireside Chat with Dr. Maulana Karenga with the topic, The Ethics of Reparations, Engaging the Holocaust of Enslavement. On Tuesday, November the 14th, our next webinar will be Shaping Narrative, Spotlight on Reparation Book Authors. Our panelists will be Dr. Mary Frances Berry, whose book, pivotal book, My Face is Black is True. We will have Dr. Ray Wimbush, the author of Should America Pay, as well as Belinda's Petition. We have V.P. Franklin, who has a book coming out around the beginning of the year, co-authored on reparations by himself, Mary Frances Berry, and several other persons as well. Never want to leave out Robert Wesley. That was one of the first things that I read about reparations decades ago. It wasn't a book, but it was a lengthy article called Many Billions Gone. We have our brother Cam Howard with Reparations United, who has a pamphlet out called the Laying the Foundations for Reparations, for Local Reparations. Who's that? Me, myself, Nkechi Taifa, author of Reparations on Fire, How and Why It's Spreading Across America. We have also invited Olufemi Taiwo, and his book is my brain is just gone right now, but he has a very pivotal book.
Reconsidering Reparations.
Reconsidering Reparations. Thank you so very much. And Catherine Frankie was invited also. Her book is called Repair. And Omali Yeshitela with the African People's Socialist Party. He has compiled his book that dates back to the late 70s, early 80s, called The Verdict is in Reparations Now. And then to conclude our fall series in November, we have invited Robin Ruth Simmons, and she has been heralded as the Rosa Parks of the reparations movement. So that's what our series this fall is going to be. So please mark your calendars, and very shortly there will be registration links for you to fill out. So what we're going to do right now, as we are beginning to bring on Cheryl Grills and introducing her, I would like to let you know that she is in the process right here, right now, of trying to get to her office. She has been driving for hours. Okay, she was in the central region of California as part of a regional briefing on California Reducing Disparities Project, focusing on mental health disparities and how to reduce them. But she told me what was so very important about her presentation in the central region is that this project is designed by the community itself, using culture and historical and political context. So I'm going to turn it back over now to my colleague Jessica and Mitchell Abuwar. We can take off the save the date. And if you could introduce Dr. Cheryl Grills, and we're going to play the clip while we are awaiting her arrival.
Thank you so much, Nkechi. Dr. Cheryl Grills is a clinical psychologist with a current emphasis in community psychology, a president's professor and full professor in the Department of Psychological Science. She has been on the faculty of Loyola Marymount University for 36 years and is the founder and director of its Psychology Applied Research Center. She also founded the Imoyasi Community Support Services, a 33-year nonprofit organization providing action, research, program evaluation, and strategic technical assistance to social justice and social service community-based organizations. Dr. Grills is a national past president of the Association of Black Psychologists. In her leadership role in the organization, she was a founding member of the Alliance of National Psychological Associations for Racial and Ethnic Equity. She co-designed the Racial Stress and Trauma Emotional Emancipation Circles, a community self-help model established by the Community Healing Network and implemented in partnership with the association. As the lead of the EE Circles training team, Dr. Grills has trained people of African ancestry around the world to facilitate healing circles that address the stress and trauma associated with anti-Black racism. In 2019, using community-based participatory practice, she co-created and continues to support the South Los Angeles Healing Circles, a community-based healing circle effort designed for City Council District 8 to disrupt violence in South Los Angeles. Dr. Grills served on the California Reparations Task Force appointed by the governor of California from 2021 to 2023, and she is a commissioner on the National African American Reparations Commission. So now we're going to share the final remarks of Dr. Grills on the final report for the California Reparations Task Force.
And then hopefully she should be joining right at the conclusion of that. And her topic is the California effort through the lens of psychology. And she's also going to share some tidbits, some specific recommendations to guide governmental reparations processes. And I just want to say one little thing, if I may, because I heard Dr. Grills as part of the Congressional Black Caucus forum on reparations that was held about a week or so ago. And she shared tidbits from what she's going to discuss in much more depth today. And I said, I knew we needed to have a specific delineated fireside chat with her to hear some of these specific recommendations for governmental reparation processes based on her experience with the California Reparations Task Force, as well as looking at all of this through her expertise, i.e. the lens of psychology. So let's go on and play that clip, Jessica. And we also will have time after Dr. Grills' presentation for Q&A. So you can put your Q&A in the chat. And I know someone has already put in the chat 400 years of African American History Commission. And when I said chat, I didn't mean chat, I mean in the Q&A box. So that's fine. I'm glad that they are in the house. Absolutely and completely. Let's let it roll. Has the volume started?
Is it not showing the?
No, wait, I don't hear it.
I'll fix it. Okay.
All right.
Standing ovation.
Yeah. I don't have iron.
Yes, sure. Member Grills, we'll turn to you for your final reflections.
Thank you. So, I'm a psychologist. So I'm going to share my comments through the lens of a psychologist, a clinical psychologist nonetheless, who understands how critical it is to appreciate human behavior and the human spirit. So in saying that, first of all, I want to say that being on this task force has been an honor. It has been an honor to serve alongside my colleagues here up on this dais. It has been an honor to serve with the DOJ team. And it has been an honor to do what I can to respect the memory of my grandfather. My granddaddy, I called him granddaddy, he was a sharecropper who worked his way out of that condition to create his own businesses in Manning, South Carolina, and to put his 3 daughters of his 6 children all through college. It broke my heart when I was trying to do my own lineage search to see granddaddy, someone who is a giant in my eyes, listed as a bag boy. I'm here this day to say, you were not a bag boy. You will not be disrespected that way. Granddaddy, you were a proud, industrious, principled Black man, father, grandfather, and stoic, who in the middle of the night would go and cut down or remove Black bodies hanging from trees. That was what my grandfather did. Strange fruit, for sure. I pray that he and all of our ancestors in this room are looking upon us today and saying, job well done. So this has been, for me, the work on this task force, it's been a labor of love marked by the highest of highs, those highs including witnessing the brilliance of our experts, our scholars, our lawyers, who have come and given testimony that contributed to this encyclopedia of truth. But it was also a time where it's a labor of love with the lowest of lows. And some of those lows were actually witnessing the pain, the anguish, the unresolved trauma experienced by our people. As Dr. Brian Smedley said, he said the most enduring effect of the thing called slave was to dehumanize more than 30% of the human population while holding harmless the perpetrators of this crime against humanity. And I saw the consequences of not holding the perpetrators accountable. And so when I look at the lowest of lows, I'm reminded of something that truly broke my heart when I was sitting on a panel at Harvard University with talking on the topic of reparations to Harvard's School of Public Policy. And she described a young brother, a gang member in Boston, who had tattooed on his arm, "Born to be hated, dying to be loved." We should be alarmed and heartbroken that a child has tattooed that on his arm. That is not acceptable, and the entire country should mobilize into making sure that no child has to go through life carrying that burden. I ask myself, where is America's sense of humanity? This is no minor question. As a society, we should be concerned with the extent to which we have lost compassion, empathy, and a sense of respect for other human beings. We have to understand that at the end of the day, for those of us of African ancestry, no matter what the legislature does, no matter what the federal government does or the president, at the end of the day, no matter what happens, our final report sets the record straight. And no matter the outcome, as Sembeni says, if the rest of the world does not see us, we see ourselves. We know the truth, and we will not be blinded. As human beings, Black folk have a need for belonging, for agency and respect. To have this denied us since our forced arrival into this country is not a minor thing psychologically. We bleed, we hurt, we will die if you don't give us air and water. We are human beings, and we have to understand the anguish, the multi-generational prolonged suffering this country has meted upon us. We have to remember the anguish contained in Doc Rivers' comment in 2020 when he said, "We keep loving this country and this country doesn't love us back." As human beings, that hurts. And we have to recognize that that hurt needs to be resolved. It needs to be addressed. And so what I want to conclude with is America. So you know that movie that say, "I know what you did last night"? We can now say, America, we know what you did, and we know what you continue to do. We see you. The question is, America, do you see yourself? So to California and America, I conclude with the following words that I beg you to reflect on. Media, I beg you, go deeper. Go deeper, right? So those words are, Baldwin said, "You cannot lynch me and keep me in ghettos without becoming something monstrous yourself. We have to understand that reparations is not, again, as I believe Member Tamaki and others have said, it's not just about Black people. This is a fight for the heart and the soul and the integrity and the authenticity of American society. And Baldwin went one step further, because he was deep like that. He said, the future of the country depends on white people being able to ask and answer the question of themselves, why they created the NIGGER. Struggle with that question. Why did I need to create it? How have I been manipulated in this racialized society? And how have I been impacted emotionally, psychologically, and in terms of my own sense of humanity as a person that is part of a society to which we all have a responsibility to one another? So if we want to see transformative change, if we want to see our democracy make it into the future, we got to grapple with the elephant in the room, which is racism. Past, present, and needs to be stopped going into the future. And so to all of you who have come today and have been coming over the last 2 years, I say the real work begins now. And it's not just up to our legislators. Community, it's your turn at bat. And we need you at bat to monitor, to inform, and to impress upon our legislature, our neighbors, our larger community, our folks at work, that the work of retribution, the work of reparations is the work of American society, and any diminishment of recommendations for repair will not be accepted. Period, full stop. Thank you.
Period, full stop. I'm Cheryl Grills is 5 minutes away from her office. And I want to say this right here, if you can see on my screen, it's just the interim report from the California Reparations Task Force. And this is 500 pages. The final report spans over 1,100 pages. Okay, we're talking about a comprehensive look at the way the United States and California wronged descendants of enslaved persons through racial terror, through political disenfranchisement, through unequal housing, through the lack of educational opportunities, environmental racism, and the harms go on and on and on. And also offers suggestions for issuing a formal apology and implementing a curriculum based on the task force's finding. The report has been described as a scathing indictment of the ways the state was complicit in, and at times a leader, an active leader of innumerable harms against the Black community. And so while we're waiting for the word to come from Dr. Grills, and she's in her office, we're gonna play the final remarks from Lisa Holder from the task force. And as soon as I get the text, if Lisa has to not finish, then we'll just cut it at that point and bring in Dr. Grills. Is that okay, Jessica and Mitchell Abuwar?
Yes, ma'am.
That sound good? All right. So and I will say there are nearly 100 people on this call right now. And I know that everybody is waiting to hear Dr. Cheryl Grills and her topic, the California effort through the lens of psychology, as well as her specific recommendations to guide governmental reparations processes. So we're going to hear some of the final remarks from the last session of the California Reparations Task Force from Lisa Holder.
Thank you, Member Grills, for those powerful final reflections. I'll now turn to Member Holder for her reflections.
Thank you, Chair Moore. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. So said the great Frederick Douglass. The reparations process allows us to speak truth to power. The reparation process also teaches truth to dismantle oppressive legacies of power. The task force report catalogs the full scope and depth of injustice visited upon African Americans in California. In doing so, it does not divide us. To the contrary, it unites us by creating a space for us to come together around an honest narrative and a historical record with some integrity. The report creates an opportunity for a long overdue, candid discussion about race in America. We are not post-racial. It allows us to have a candid discussion about the anti-Black animus that permeates every aspect of American life. The overwhelming evidence in this report compels us to acknowledge that we exist within a caste system. And it's a caste system that perpetuates badges of slavery with devastating effects on contemporary Black communities. The report recommendations provide us the tools to reconcile this truth, to course correct, to repair the harm, and to finally begin to heal. As you read this report and grapple with the horrifying statistics that establish that ongoing systemic anti-Black oppression is real, you may at times feel a sense of despair. Indeed, the report shines a spotlight on the darkest hours and most obscured chapters of our collective past and present. But as the saying goes, never are we nearest to the light than when darkness is deepest. As a task force, we have endeavored to create a clear roadmap for undertaking a third reconstruction, where we transform our systems so that they finally serve the most marginalized descendant communities and cover the debt owed. And make no mistake, from the last two Reconstruction efforts in the 1870s and the 1970s, which were upended by right-wing reactionaries and racial terror, we learned that the fixes must be adaptive, iterative, and farsighted to overcome the constant headwinds of systemic white supremacy. And for those reactionaries who say slavery is old news and the time for reparations has passed, well, you know what? I've been a civil rights lawyer for 20 years. And I say, show me the statute of limitations on mass genocide. Show me the statute of limitations on the world's greatest crime against humanity. And show me the statute of limitations on accountability for original sin. It has been my great honor to serve on this task force and to do the profound work to uplift this book of truth. 1,100 pages of pure, unvarnished truth. And this book of truth will be the catalyst to unite and reconcile our communities. It will not divide us. And I'd like to thank the people who made it all possible. Madam Secretary Weber, you are an inspiration. I thank the governor. I thank our tireless and dauntless DOJ partners, our intrepid and fierce economists who provided us with creative solutions for reconciling the debt owed. And a special thanks posthumously to Dr. Spriggs. I want to thank the 100+ scholars who came in here and to testify, the experts, the Bunch Center researchers who illuminated the path of knowledge about the broad and continuing impact of slavery, segregation, and post-civil rights apartheid on our state apparatus. And finally, I thank the activists that pushed AB 3121 forward and stayed engaged throughout the past 2 years of hearings. And the scores of people who participated in public comment and listening sessions and allowed themselves to be vulnerable, shared with us their pain and their fury and their truth, and afforded the human emotions that actually breathed life into this process and fueled the work. And speaking of work, we have only just begun the work. From here on out, it's going to take tremendous effort from all of our communities across race lines. And remember, part of the work here is to stay alert, stay focused, stay on task, to resist disinformation. That is the enemy. Resist imbalanced media messaging. And resist the status quo's racialized tropes that always seek and unfortunately manage to divide us. We need to mobilize and organize and build the political will required to compel our elected representatives to vote for a reparations bill. I'll close by quoting the great songwriter and truth-telling bard, Bob Marley. All that glitters is not gold. Half the story has never been told. But now that you see the light, stand up for your rights. Get up and stand up for Black reparations.
Get up and stand up for Black reparations. Get up and stand up for Black reparations. Get up and stand up for what? For Black reparations. And with that, we are honored and we are thrilled. Take a breath, Dr. Grills, okay? Because I know you've been, we are blessed and we are thrilled. We have already introduced you. Our over 100 participants have been waiting with bated breath to hear from you, to talk about the California effort through the lens of psychology, as well as some of those specific recommendations to guide governmental reparations processes. So with that, on behalf of National Black Cultural Information Trust and Reparation Information Education Project, we would like to bring to the stage Dr. Cheryl Grills. Take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry that I am joining late, but what we thought was a 3-hour drive from LA to Fresno turned out to be more like 4.5 hours with traffic and wrong turns. So here I am, and I'm really looking forward to sharing this information with folks today, because I think we need to expand our analysis of not just, reparations and what it means, but also expand the different perspectives that we can bring to the table to define our strategy. And so what I'm sharing are some considerations for the movement through the lens of psychology. And also, if time permits, some lessons learned from the California Reparations Task Force. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite people, because I quote him all the time, because he was a sage that way, and that's James Baldwin. And Baldwin said, people are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them. And reparations, as I am known to say, is an opportunity for us to plot our escape. And so this notion about being trapped in history is so true of America and America's relationship to her cruel, inhumane history of enslaving Black people, its history of dehumanizing Black people, its history of acting the exact opposite of what it presents itself to be as it has interacted with Black folk. So we have we've had a kind of set of brilliant analyses of the issues, the needs, and the strategies associated with reparations. We can't afford to exclude a careful analysis of issues through the lens of psychology and human behavior, because at the end of the day, it's human beings that are involved in this process. It's human beings that cause the atrocity. It's human beings that perpetuated it. It's human beings who suffered as a result of the dehumanization over 600 years of Black folks. So we first should not underestimate or ignore the influence of the 600 plus years of anti-Black racial socialization that includes 400 plus years of uninterrupted racial assaults against Black people. And that process creates a mindset, okay? And a mindset that's grounded in a set of false narratives and a kind of unwillingness to deal in truth and fact. Secondly, these false narratives establish a set of attitudes that color Black folks in every possible negative light that could be. Third, these attitudes drive discriminatory behaviors, practices, and policies that have undermined us since our forced arrival on these shores. And fourth, all sectors of society have mobilized in support of the false narratives. There has not been a nook or cranny of American society left untouched. So what was once a false narrative becomes actually the social norm and becomes so pervasive that it's unseen. And as something that's unseen, it becomes hard to challenge it and correct it. Because it's like, well, I can't see oxygen molecules. Does that mean that it's not there? If it weren't, we'd be dying, all of us, in this moment. So that you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there, but it, again, makes it hard to challenge it. And then fifth, at the end of the day, all racial and ethnic groups, including some members of the Black community, don't know what they don't know, and operate from a position of misinformation, right? Internalized racism, and the press to become white adjacent in all manner of human existence and behavior. The sixth point is then to take a detour from this trajectory becomes unacceptable, because it will challenge people's very sense of reality, their identity, their values, what they think they fundamentally know. And it will create what in psychology we call cognitive dissonance, which means that what we think we are, what we think we believe in, what we think are our values, and what we actually do, say, and engage in they don't line up, and that causes us distress. And so our systems are going to rally into, a process to get us back into a state of things match up. But oftentimes that may mean at the expense of truth and fact. So finally, then, as I'm setting the stage, to dismantle all of this is not a minor feat. We're talking about overriding how our brains are wired. I'm going to say that again. We are called upon to override how our brains are wired, what are basic psychological processes that we know in psychology, have studied, researched, have empirical evidence for. And many of these processes, by the way, they're automatic. They're not conscious. It's not like we're sitting there saying, I'm feeling a bit of cognitive dissonance right now. Let me see what's going on. No. It's happening in split-second time. So these things are happening outside of our conscious awareness, and they can directly influence our perceptions, our attitudes, and our behaviors. So then when you add on top of that race, it becomes even more convoluted, more complicated, and potentially like stepping into quicksand. You're in it, you kind of know you're in it, but you can't get out of it. Or like in that movie, when they would, get out, you go into the what do they call it? The dark place, and you can't figure out how to get your way out. So when it comes to race and human behavior, our brains are very much involved without our conscious awareness. And I have a few slides that I want to share. I'm going to see whether or not this works for me to share screen with you. And hold on 1 second. I'm going to ask you whether or not you're seeing this in host disabled. Okay. All right.
Is it disabled?
Okay. Host disabled participant screen sharing, but it's not letting me share.
Okay, I'm gonna see what the issue is. Give me just a
Okay.
second.
Maybe disable panelists screen share. And while we're doing that, I just want to remind people, if you have questions, put your questions in the Q&A box. I know there are over 100 people on this call right now, so make sure, don't just raise your hand, but put your questions in the Q&A box. Okay.
I'm just gonna make you a co-host so we can see if that changes something.
That probably will fix it. Okay, now I'm co-host. And yes, I can now show it. And I'm going to optimize and then advanced portion of screen, share, and let me do presenter view. Okay, can you see my slide okay?
Yes.
And nothing's cut off. Okay, perfect. So the first thing I want to show here is what happens when people of different races see each other, right? So this is some neuropsychological research that was done that shows what happens when a Black person sees a white person and a white person sees a Black person, or when Black people see Black people or white people see white people. We have a lot of evidence that race is processed automatically and that it's processed differently for whether or not you are part of the in-group or the out-group, and in very, very meaningful ways. And so what this graph is showing you is what we call ERP. They're waves of electrical activity in the brain that demonstrate when an event is being processed by the brain. So here, and it's showing what we call the P200, right? So when you take here, and these are white people, and when you show white people, the straight line is white people seeing white people. And this is what their brain is signaling in P200, which, by the way, is a signal of danger, of potential threat. So here's what they're their P200 threat level looks like, if you will. And then the dotted line shows Black people. Now, this graph is counterintuitive. The higher the line means the less threat. So when white people see white people, this is their level of threat. When white people see Black people, their level of threat is higher. And this is, again, automatic. This P200 wave has been shown over and over again. And by the way, how quickly does this happen? 0.3 of a second. Once you lay eyes on somebody, in 0.3 of a second, the P200 could be activated. When Black people see Black people, which is the dotted line, this is their P200. But when we see white people, we see danger, we see threat, right? Again, when we encounter each other, before we can even decide what it is that we are wanting to think about them, our brain has already taken over. That part of the animal in us that has a survival mechanism says, you know what? I want to survive. History has shown me that when I encounter these people, when I encounter these stimuli, it is going to be potentially harmful for me. So what I want to do is to begin to describe some examples of different things that influence what happens when we start talking about race, especially Black, white, but it does extend to other racial groups. And the first context that's important is to understand how these practices influence non-Black folk, so that when we're engaging with them, what is it that we're actually seeing and experiencing? Because we think that they are seeing and experiencing us for exactly who we are, but that is not the case at all. The second thing that's important is to understand how some of these things, these dynamics in psychology, actually affect Black folk, right? But before I do this, I want to make sure folks understand that there is a difference between what you see, what you hear, you taste, you touch, you smell, and your perception of things, right? It's the difference between what we call sensation and perception in psychology. It's why two people can see the exact same thing and walk away with very different interpretations of it. It's why we see these vast differences in polls about what's happening and what the attitudes are around racial issues. So sensation is your, how can we put this? Your window to the world, right? You sense things that are actually out there through smell, touch, taste, hear, and some other mechanisms. Perception is interpreting what comes through that window. It's the process of organizing and interpreting that sensory information, that touch, that sound, that visual, enabling us to recognize meaningful objects and events. But we have to understand perception is tricky. It can get really confusing. This guy here says, no, that's 4. This one here says, no, it's 3. But it's from their vantage point that they come up with the 4 or the 3, right? These folks up here, the glass is half full. That same glass, same amount of water is seen by the other person as half empty. It's what is your perception. It's not what's actually there. But when it comes to race, one of the things that's really important to understand and that can help us flip the script is that your perception of me is actually a reflection of you. It's exposing and revealing the particular experiences, biases, attitudes that you have that almost kind of get projected onto me. So sensation involves receiving information. We have literally nerve cells that receive information like, chemicals for smell, sound waves for hearing, pressure for touch. And that information goes to our nervous system. And that energy is then given meaning, right? And that's the perception, where we organize and interpret that sensory information, enabling us to recognize meaningful objects and events. So what are some of the psychological processes we need to incorporate into our understanding of reactions to Black people in general, and then reactions to reparations, and the crafting of strategies to further the cause of reparatory justice? First, there are factors that influence what and how people see us. And then after the 600 plus years of global anti-Blackness, one of the things that we can fairly easily say is that people don't really see us. And we have to understand that. We have to stop wasting energy thinking it's personal. Yes, it's personal in that it affects me, but it is not personal in that they really truly see me and are valuing me, the person. They don't see us. They see us through filtered through misinformation, lack of information, fear, and projection. There are things like in-group and out-group dynamics that set the stage for how we engage with one another, and that makes this stuff even more kind of cast in concrete. And that is this notion about that there's an in-group and an out-group. An in-group is any group or category to which you belong and you have membership, and that has fostered a sense of loyalty and a sense of identity, right? You can have then an out-group, which is the opposite, any group to which you do not belong or to which you do not identify. And it can be seen as a rival group that the in-group members ridicule, make derogatory characterizations of, and sometimes become aggressive toward. So when we start thinking about perception, it is further kind of entrenched into a dynamic where people don't see us, because we have this tendency to form in-groups and out-groups. And it's not just on race, we do it on a whole bunch of things. I go to a public school, I go to a private school, I live on this side of town, I live on that side of town. I'm part of Delta Sigma Theta. No, I'm an AKA. And so then we start acting accordingly. The minute we are influenced by this dynamic of an in and out group, issues of threat can emerge. Threat that is fundamental to our survival instincts. So once we experience potential threat, we go into a basic stress response. It's an ancient response, it's evolutionary. When the threat presents itself like this tiger, we go into fight or flight or freeze, or we literally can faint or go into collapse, right? And that's without thinking. That can happen very quickly. And at the end of the day, we're not so different from other animals in this basic need to survive. Now, one way that we can think about it is that when we evolved as human beings, we started out kind of like reptiles, and we still have our reptile brain. And that brain that is still with us operates off of basic instincts. As we evolved as human beings, we got new brain structures, what we now call the limbic system, that operates off of emotions. And then as we've evolved to how we are today, we have this higher order functioning in the neocortex. That's where judgment and reasoning and critical thinking are happening. This is called the triune brain model. It's a simplified model developed by this researcher, Paul MacLean, but it's useful for helping us understand that sometimes when people are reacting to us or we're reacting to other people, it is not on the basis of any kind of critical thinking, reasoning, or judgment. It's pure emotions or pure instinct. Now, the instincts especially are important, and they help us survive, like when you need to make a snap judgment to get out of the way of a moving truck. But for the most part, we really want to operate here. But when threat presents itself, right, then we may forget all the judgment and reasoning, and we go straight here. So when people react to reparations in a negative light, Are they in fact doing this as a result of clear rational thinking, or is it an emotional reaction or an instinctual reaction? It makes a difference, because then we need to define our strategy based on how these different levels of stress response are occurring. At the end of the day, one of the other things that we have to understand is this notion called neuroception. It's a term developed by Dr. Porges to describe the autonomic nervous system, which is automatic responses to cues that somewhere in our environment, there's a danger, a life threat, or we're safe. That neuroception does not happen from our thinking. It comes out of our bodies. It comes not from your cognitive thinking, your analysis. Your body actually senses the environment and then sends a message to your brain, hey, this is safe, or hey, this is not safe. This is dangerous. This is life-threatening. This is different from perception. And this detection of danger without awareness, it happens far below our conscious awareness. But it's the thing that has helped us to stay alive. So when a baby coos at a caregiver, but cries at a stranger, that baby is using neuroception. When a toddler enjoys a parent's embrace, but views the hug from a stranger as an assault, that's a bodily reaction. That's neuroception. And we have to understand that when the body detects or decides through neuroception that there is danger, we then react quickly. And one of the first things that we lose is our ability to be in social engagement. So when we start fighting with each other, let's say within the movement, it may be that there is a sense of threat, that our ideas, our perspective is not being valued. Our conception of what it's going to take to repair what has been done to us is being threatened. And I value that so much that I now am going into fight or flight or freeze. And we come out of the social engagement. We need to be in the green area to have meaningful, substantive conversations where we can hear each other, we can understand and have empathy for each other, we can be able to respond in ways that reflect compassion, curiosity, openness, mindfulness, and connection. I often have wondered to what extent some of the most contentious exchanges I've seen in the reparations process to date is a reflection of the fact that people are feeling threatened and they have moved out of this social engagement realm and they're up here. And once you're up here, there's panic, there's fear, there's anxiety, there's worry, there's frustration and irritation and anger, even rage. And if it goes to the other end of the spectrum where your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, you go into freeze, you become numb, you shut down, you become hopeless, you feel trapped. But in either that red zone or that yellow zone, conversation and connection and problem solving go by the wayside. So another way to kind of understand this is in this polyvagal theory, the trauma that we've experienced is in the body, it's not in the event. At some point, we have to step back and say, wait a minute, what's really going on here? And can we calm the heck down, right? This is the antidote to when we get into a situation where we're experiencing danger or threat and we leave out of that social engagement. Calm down, de-stress, get back into the social nervous system, because meaningful conversation is gone if we do not, right? To ensure all serious conversations, if we want to be successful in this movement, we need to make sure that all serious conversations are preceded by careful attention to what is my stress level and what tools can I use to calm my nervous system so I don't go into fight, flight, or freeze, or so that I can get out of that. The other thing is that because we've experienced multi-generational assault as Black folk, we end up carrying a load of stress that is not sustainable. One of the ways that we talk about this is called allostatic load. And let me explain that to you. And again, this may also help us understand and be a little bit more compassionate and empathic, but still holding accountable those in our movement who don't seem to be engaged in principled struggle, right? And it's because perhaps their stress load has gotten to the point where things are out of sync. And that happens for all of us. So this notion of allostatic load, one way to explain it is, imagine that predator comes into the room right now. What's going to happen? You are going to run, right? And once you get to safety, you're going to chill. This is a good stress response. Danger is there, you run or you fight, and then you get to safety and you calm back down and your body is now settled again. Okay, now what's going on here? Homeboy is running. What's he running from? My dog would go, what's wrong with this picture? You know, you get to the point where stress is so habitual, it becomes your norm that you don't need predator in the room anymore. Your day in and day out experience is to be on high stress mode. And when you do that, you end up creating the situation like you see here, an overused electrical outlet that will blow a circuit. So we've got to understand how these things are operating. Here's one other really quick way of looking at allostatic overload that happens for us. This is a story about two brothers. So when my brother was born in '85, my mother purchased two identical teddy bears. The one on the left has been my brother's for 30 years. The one on the right had been kept in storage for my brother's first child who was born today. That's the story. What I want you to look at is the condition of the two bears. This one overused for years, looking like a true distortion of its original self. So again, what's our antidote? We have to understand that stress is operating and that stress can influence what we're seeing and how we're acting. Now, other factors can also come into play at the same time, and I'm going to list a few and define them and show how they are especially vulnerable to racialized situations and encounters. But if we formed a study group or a work group to kind of look at principles in psychology and apply those things to the work that we're doing and to an analysis of things that we encounter in the movement, I think that could advance us in some significant ways. So one of the first things that I wanted to mention is this notion that perception can be influenced by what we call a perceptual set, right? So perception, again, is how you give meaning to something. So let me give you this quick story from Gary Peterson. So the way the story goes, it's about the last day of kindergarten, and the kids are bringing a gift to their teacher. On the last day of school, kindergartners bring parting gifts to their teacher. She takes the first package from a florist's son, shakes it, and announces, "I know what this is. It's some flowers." "You're right," shouted the 5-year-old. When the candy store owner's daughter presents her gift, the teacher once again examines it carefully, shakes the package, and declares, "I know, some candy." "How did you guess?" asked the little girl. Finally, the little boy whose father runs a liquor store brought his package forward. Although she noticed it was leaking, the teacher held it up, shook it, and even took a taste. "It's wine," she announced. "You're wrong," replied her student. Putting another drop on her tongue, she smiled. "Oh, my bad. It must be champagne." "Wrong again," said the little boy. After tasting a third time, the teacher gave up. She says, "Please, I can't figure this out. Tell me what this wonderful gift is." Grinning, the little boy answered, "It's a puppy." Now, I don't know about you, but I'd be a little mortified at this moment if realizing that I put puppy pee in my mouth 3 times because I had a perceptual set. And I decided that if you're the child of a candy store owner, you must be bringing me candy. And if you're the child of a liquor store owner, you must be bringing me liquor. If you're a child of a Black community, you must be bringing me trouble. If you're a child of ADOS, you must have this perspective. If you're a child of NCOBRA, you must have, you see? So these perceptual sets make it hard for us to do our work. And if you want to know what some of the racial perceptual sets are, it's actually quite easy. Just go to Google Images. And in Google Images, you'll find that there's this availability heuristic, right? And when you see the images that are projected for Black folk, these are images that reflect the mindset, the perceptual set that America has, and in fact, the world has, but this is now Google Images for the US, of what are Black men. And you see that if you do the different racial groups, the only group for whom there's a variety of images that are not sexualized, objectified, criminalized, etc., is white men. So through experience, we come to expect certain results, and these expectations may give us a perceptual set, and it can influence, not only what we think, but what we feel, what we see, what we hear, and it can end up defining how the society understands us. So this distorted lens is really problematic, and when you add the availability heuristic, it gets even more complicated. So let me just define availability heuristic really quickly. It's estimating the likelihood of events based on their availability in memory. So if instances come readily to mind, and sometimes it's because of their vividness, we presume that these events are common. Here, the news, media, and movies and TV and music are central because they repeat over and over and over again negative images and stereotypes and messages about reparations, look at how the media covered reparations and decisions about reparations for San Francisco, for California writ large. The media kept honing in on, this is the cash, 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 when cash payment was this amount. But they want to make sure that in the mindset of America, there's this big, financial debt that we're going to have to pay. And then that invokes a whole bunch of other things, other availability heuristics that essentially say Black people are not deserving, Black people are criminals, Black people don't know how to manage their money. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So take another example. The Washington Post did a report, and in that article, they presented the findings of a study that was commissioned by Color of Change. The title of the article, you can look it up, is How News Media Distorts Black Families. It addresses the false narrative that we continue to hear, which is that Black families are in disarray and were better off under enslavement. The methodology that they used for the study, they looked at 800 relevant stories published or aired from January of 2015 through December of 2016. The coverage was from national broadcast and cable news outlets like ABC, CBS, MSNBC, mainstream newspapers like the Washington Post itself, the New York Times, USA Today, and others. In stories about poor families, they chose to feature Black families in their coverage 59% of the time, even though only 27% of families living below the poverty line in this country are Black. In coverage of welfare, 60% of the families portrayed were Black, even though only 42% of families receiving welfare are Black. And this pattern was widespread across numerous sources, but who were the worst offenders? Fox News, of course, but also CNN, the New York Times, and Breitbart. So these news coverages reinforce this idea that Black families are sources of personal, cultural, and societal instability, and that responsibility for poverty and crime lies with them, rather than with those who shape the economic and social environment that they live in. And so the news media also habitually reinforce the myth that Black fathers are less involved in their children's lives. Though the stats suggest that Black children are disproportionately born to single mothers, that does not mean that fathers aren't involved. The news and the opinion media warp public perception of gender and race by reinforcing myths and stereotypes about women and people of color, and Black people will repeat, in some instances, this stuff. So there's a problem with this, because the more that this misinformation and this hidden information is presented to us, the less available to all of us are counterpoints in truth. For example, the media attention was not given that should have been given to the 2013 study by the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That study showed that Black fathers actually spend more time engaged in parenting than fathers of all other races, that they participate more often in bathing, diapering, and taking their kids to activities and helping them with homework. Did that make the 6 o'clock news? Absolutely not, right? And so there you have not, that availability heuristic is not going to be challenged. So shaping perceptions in this way has real life consequences. And this is, what we have to figure out is how to get this out so that white folks and other racial groups understand that they have been manipulated in ways that that shape who they are, what they think, what they know, what their attitudes and values are. But they're running around thinking that it's my free will and my choice and my careful analysis. No, you're being led by the nose. And then your brain kicks in and colludes with the process. So these perceptions that result from this have real life consequences. So for example, when the news media constantly associates Black people with crime, it increases racial stereotypes among viewers. And then the public disproportionately favors punitive criminal justice policies. When the poor are depicted as overwhelmingly Black, it leads to a public that supports heavier restrictions on welfare because of a perception that people are undeserving, Black people in particular. Backers of corporate and right-wing policies gain when the news media blames Black families for societal conditions, while their role in destabilizing society and destabilizing the Black family remains invisible. And then federal poverty solutions like welfare, food stamps, supplemental security income, earned income tax credits, those things weren't stigmatized when white people were correctly understood to be the main beneficiaries of them, especially during the Great Depression of the 1930s. But once Black folks got linked with it, it's a whole different ballgame. So what is an antidote here? We have to ensure that there are facts and truth is seen, that truth will see the light of day, and we can hold media accountable. There's so much more I want to say, but I'm mindful of the time.
Yeah, because we want to make sure we get some Q&A in, and I did promise folks that you were going to give some tidbits for recommendations too. So let's see how we can incorporate all this in the short amount of time we have left.
Maybe we can do a part 2, and I actually have things in here that will help people experience for themselves when their brain takes over and they're making judgments that are not from careful, rational critical analysis. So I guess what I can do is go straight to, some lessons learned, but there's so much that we need to understand in terms of the psychology of human behavior. My question to all of us is, are we paying attention and applying what we know from these psychological principles in our analysis of the issues, our development of strategies, and our evaluation of effectiveness in our push for reparations? And then in terms of, what lessons can I say that I've learned from the California fight for reparations? I tell you, if I knew then what I know now, I would have advocated for a few things and done a few things differently. So the headlines for that are: ensure clarity in the language and used in the legislation. Just because it's written does not mean that's the full interpretation. Remember everything I just said about perception, right? And so there needs to be ample time given for people to create shared meaning and intent in whatever is in a bill. And there's a difference between who writes a bill and then who, in terms of a commission or task force or other entity, is tasked with doing something with that. The second thing is to take time to establish connection and relationships among the members of a commission or task force. And from this position of actually having some understanding of people, selecting your leadership then, right? We need to know each other. We need to have some sense of shared understanding or difference of opinion. And from that, have an informed discussion and decision about leadership. Third, ensure the commission has representatives or representation, I should say, from whatever legislative body is going to receive your recommendations. And so in California, thank God, there was wisdom to include State Senator Stephen Bradford and Assembly Member Reggie Jones Sawyer, because now they are the shepherds of our recommendations before the California House and Senate. We need people who understand, who not have done a skimming of a report, who've listened to sound bites on the news. We need people who are in it, deeply in the process of analyzing, understanding, and then crafting reparations. Fourth, we need to ensure that the members of the Black caucus, whether it's at a state level or the Black electeds at a city or a county level, or at the federal level, that they are involved, not at the end, not when all the media comes out. They need to be involved out the gate, tracking the deliberations, weighing in, and fact-checking and clarifying for themselves. They need to be informed and engaged so that when the recommendations come, everybody is ready to move. There's not infighting, there's not lack of communication, there's not clarification that's still needed. And I'm wrapping this up. Fifth, build in a strong and amply funded communications component to the commission's work, right? Especially given the stuff that I've shared and I haven't yet shared about how psychology enters into the equation. You need thoughtful, creative communications to educate people, to counter the psychological dynamics that result in people short-circuiting information, et cetera. Then also build, number 6, a cross-racial ally base and ways for them to be informed and collaborate from the start of the work, not midstream, not at the end when recommendations are being put forward. And then the last point in terms of lesson learned, insist. Yes, understand, empathize, have compassion for, but insist on principled engagement and not get distracted or diminished by groups organized to get their way by any means necessary. Individuals or organizations or entities that will spew misinformation or throw out lies just to influence people's perceptions and attitudes. We have to have principled engagement, Otherwise, the foundation on which we operate is not solid. It is, in fact, very, very shaky. So I'm going to.
So Dr. Grills, wait, this is my strong suggestion. Jessica, if you can entertain a couple of the questions for Dr. Grills, and my suggestion is, we go from 7 to 8:30. We can officially end at 8:30, but since this is being recorded, everyone has been requesting recording. My suggestion, if Dr. Grills, if you're able to stay just a little longer, even after other people have left, or if they want to stay, to complete your presentation with the slides, we'll be able to catch all of that on the recording to be able to share out to everyone. But I want to make sure we get some of the questions that have come into the chat. Jam and Dr. Grills, what do you think about that recommendation?
Mm-hmm.
And then folk can still feel free to leave at 8:30. I'd really like to be consistent with the time, but those who want to stay on, we will go on and continue this for the purposes of the for the recording. So let's, Jam, why don't you identify some questions for Dr. Grills right now?
Sure. We have one from James Woodson. What are the best ways to move people into a space where they're able to have a rational conversation and potentially change their minds? Do we need to challenge media narratives, get more active on social media, have more in-person conversations, or some combination of these or other methods? ?
That's a great question. And I would say that one of the best ways to move people into a space where they're able to have rational and empathic conversation and have open minds that can be shifted in the face of new information is to make sure that we create a safe space for folks, right? That people are given a clear message that it's not about being right or wrong, but it's about being in community and problem solving. And then in building into when we meet, when we sit down to connect, we take time for people to actually see each other, hear each other, and feel each other. Whether that's little short activities that may take 5 minutes before the real work begins in terms of conversation and problem solving, so be it. But people need to, the more I actually see you and I connect with you and I know something about your story and I know about the challenges and obstacles that you are facing, the more likely I am to listen to you, to stay connected to you, and to feel less threatened by you. So I think we need to do some more of that kind of thing. And then the other part of what you were mentioning, the question disappeared somehow. I don't know.
It's in the answered live section, but I can read it again.
Oh, okay. No, I see it. Okay. The other thing is that, yes, we do need to challenge the media narratives, but we're going to have to do it in ways that grab people's attention. Long reports are not going to get it. Even, things like docuseries, that can open some people up, but then we need, in today, especially for the younger generation, we need sound bites, but sound bites that creatives understand how to craft. And then we need to hold the media accountable. They are a part of the problem in many instances. And every time, and so it's like we need to have folks on the ready to do op-eds that challenge. Okay, New York Times said this, here's an op-ed in the LA Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, countering and challenging and questioning them. Why did you report it that way? What was your agenda? What was the objective? So it's a combination of things. And I think that there's even more. Like, we used to have those Saturday schools, right? We need to go back and look at what worked back in the civil rights movement. What worked back during enslavement, right? To keep us informed and to keep us in community, where I may not know who my biological father is anymore or where he is because he was sold off, but I have, other people in the community who step into that role. How do we, begin to create those kinds of things so that we can stay in community and stay connected to one another?
Okay, so we have another one. This one is from Nora Robinson. What is the best method for convincing suspicious white community members who do not believe reparations are necessary?
So I think there's a couple of things I think we need to do. One is we need to engage our white allies to sit down and have healing circles with white people. Because part of the problem is that they are, if we just look at the MAGA folks, if you really stop and look at them, these are folks who are in pain. They're in psychic, disarray. They are in cognitive dissonance like there is no tomorrow. And so at the end of the day, because of those things, they will make decisions and act in ways against their own best interests, right? So they need some healing. They need to understand how they've been manipulated and influenced. And then they need to then be gently taken to a place where they can see, we are not your threat. We, in fact, are your ally. Because, and if we look back at, what was his name from the Panther movement, where they did the book and then the movie? I'm blocking on his
Fred
name.
Hampton.
Yes. His demise, as was the case for Martin Luther King, as was the case for Malcolm X, was when they started mobilizing across racial lines and helping everybody see that we are all being assaulted and that we have a shared interest in identifying and dismantling it, right? But the minute we start doing that, oh my God, the forces are going to come from every which way. So I believe that that we need to help white folks get into spaces where they can do some work with white people who can lead them through it. And then I think we have an opportunity to then come to some shared space and information can be received, because like there are some dynamics that will prevent you from allowing new information in.
And there are some white allied groups who are working with white people as well. So I don't even know if I see that as our province, but we have white allied groups who are committed to that. And I think some of them were on this call or are on this call. And so maybe you can even do some specialized presentations with them. Go on, Jim, let's do maybe one or two more and then, yeah.
Okay, this question is from Shakira Abdul Ali. Dr. Grills, can you speak to the dysfunctional relationship that Black folk have with money and wealth? Given that we served as capital for more than 250 years, how might we heal ourselves in this area pursuant to the acquisition of reparations?
Right, that's a great question. And one of the things that we have to first understand is that in this process, we served the country to build the capital. We never got to manage the capital. So that's a skill set that was denied us that still needs to be developed. So one of the things that I think is going to be really important in terms of reparations and creating cross-generational wealth and managing that cross-generational wealth is basic financial management instruction and education for our community, right? If you don't have the capital to then develop the tools and the techniques and tactics to manage the money, when you get the money, you will have the challenge of figuring out what the hell to do with it and how to manage it. So I think that we created the wealth, but we weren't given the wealth to manage. And that's a skill set that still needs to be, I think, developed if we think about this across social class levels within the Black community.
Okay, so we're gonna do one more question, and I think this is to clarify. Well, I think it is Billy Wilkerson. I think we will be able to provide source references for the slides, or maybe ask Dr. Grills later, and we can include that in our follow-up to attendees. But this question from Barbara Cole: does what you were talking about in your presentation differ from implicit bias?
Implicit bias is one issue, one dynamic among many others. And I haven't even gotten to implicit bias yet. So implicit bias is there, but these are things that go above and beyond or are in addition to implicit bias.
So I think at this time, we want to really thank Dr. Grills for a presentation. If you don't need to leave, you can stay to hear the rest of it. But for those who do, we do want to respect the time that we will make the recording available. I just want to remind folk that the next Reparation Information Thought Series will be Tuesday, October the 17th. The topic is reparations. What do Black folk want? Our panelists, Jessica and Mitchell Arawar and Kabibi Tahimba. And the one directly after that on Thursday, October 26th, will be Millennial Activists in the Reparations Movement Speak. And our guests will be Nicole Carty, Trevor Smith, Teresa Heath, Queen AF, Kevin Cosney, and Sister Lily X. And so you will be receiving the whole slew that we gave at the beginning of the of this thought series, the whole fall lineup that goes all the way through to December. You'll be getting that as in the logins. So with that, Dr. Grills, if you can go on and continue your presentation for the tape. Those who need to leave, please go leave, and we will make sure that all the attendees and we'll publish the tape far and wide. So thank you. So I'm turning it back over to you, Dr. Grills.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen again. Portion of screen and present your view. And can you see it okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So remember as I was explaining this, that our brains kick into gear in a number of ways. And some of these ways are what I'm going to show you now. One of them is called top-down processing, right? So rather than looking at what is actually there, we construct perceptions, drawing on our experience and our expectations. So when you have bottom-up processing, you have the sensory receptors, they relay information to the brain, and then the brain interprets that information. So you see an apple, your eyes receive the information as an apple, and it goes to your brain, and your brain says, okay, it's an apple. Top-down processing says previous experience and expectations will affect the detection and the analysis of the information that you will receive. And that helps us to understand things like, visual illusions. So rather than just saying, oh, that's an apple, what you're going to see is this is an apple, but I actually have only seen apples used for target practice, right? When you're doing bow and arrow kinds of things, and it's set on a pedestal, and so you don't realize that the apple has many other functions because you're only interpreting the apple based on your previous experience and expectations. So then there's other things, so when we look at sensation, that's the data coming in, perception, how we make sense of it, right? So when you look at what's here on this visual, what do you see? The sensory information is there, but do your perceptual skills allow you to see the faces? There's a face here, there's a face here, there's a face here, etc., right? There's a portion of a face there. So how do we begin to realize when we are not necessarily seeing what's there, but we are perceiving something else, sometimes reading into what's actually there? Let's see. There's the faces, there's the horses, there's the rocks, but most people tend not to see the faces. When you look at this, how many legs does this elephant have? And Nkechi and Jam, I'm going to ask you to join me and come off of mute as we get to some a few slides coming up, because folks can't chime in, but you'll experience it. And don't worry, it's not about a right or wrong answer. But in terms of this one, when you look at this, how many legs do you see? It presents a conundrum. It's a visual illusion. And so what's going to help you? Bottom up or top down processing. This reflects the difference between sensation and perception. There's only 4, but because
I
of
thought I saw 8.
yeah, but it's not. It's an illusion because of the way in which the image is drawn and the texture and the shading, right? So this is where I want you and Jam to help me. So we're going to do a reaction time test, all right? We do these a lot in psychology. I'm going to flash some words on the screen, and I just want you to say them as fast as you can. I don't want you to think about it. It's a reaction time test. It's about how fast you can be, all right?
It's going to be me because Jam is putting her children to bed.
Okay, no problem.
All right.
All right, ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Say it.
I don't see McDonald.
Okay. Say it.
Machinery.
McHenry.
McMahon.
Okay.
It's not up yet. Machinery.
Okay. Most people, when they see this, they see a list, right? McDonald. McDonald, McHenry, McMahon. And then they might say McHenry as opposed to seeing machinery. All right. All right. Okay. Now this is another reaction time test. I want you to be real fast. Okay.
Okay. When I see it. Okay.
Okay. I want you to tell, I want you to say for me what the words on the screen actually spell. You ready?
Okay.
Okay. What do these words spell?
What do these words spell?
Oh, what's the first one?
Folk.
Okay. What's this
Croak.
word? Okay. What's this word?
Soak.
Okay. So folk, croak, soak. What do you
Yes.
call the white of an egg? Fast.
Yolk.
Okay. Thank you. Wrong. But that's okay.
The white of
Because
an egg. Oh, the
set you
white of
up.
an egg.
Is albumin. Okay. But because I set you up, your brain took over. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Now look at this next. I want you to tell me. You don't need to write it down. You just need to tell me what the word is. Ready?
Okay.
What's this word?
Write it down. Science.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Now hold that thought. We'll come back to it. I want you to read this statement as fast as you can. Okay. I'm going to put it up on the screen. I want you to read it. You ready?
Okay.
All right. Read quickly.
Second reader say, so you think you're a pretty good reader, then I bet you see the problem in the words that you are reading right now.
Okay. You kind of sort of got it, but you missed a few, right? We'll come back to that in a second.
There were some words that were repeated.
Exactly. Actually, at the end of every sentence, the word was repeated at the beginning of the next sentence. Most people will miss it. Most miss the extra the or duplicate words in a sentence. Our experience with the English language tells us that we rarely encounter a sentence that has 2 identical words adjacent to each other. So experience is going to take over, and you're not going to see the duplicate words. Imagine what that means when we start talking about issues related to race. When we do see the duplicate words, our perceptions don't match what's really there if we don't actually read the word, right? We skip it because experience says the rule in the English language is that there are not 2 duplicate words. According to some research by White and Brokel, studying the role of expectation in language, our brain sees, and sometimes it sees more than what is really there. So when we're presenting information to the general public, unaware of reparations or filled with misinformation about reparations, peppered with fear and threat about Black people receiving reparations, what ends up happening with messaging? What are they actually seeing, right? The point is that perception is not a passive process. It takes into account experience and reason, and sometimes we will guess incorrectly. And how are we incorporating the dynamics of perception into the reparations movement? So in terms of that reaction time, again, because I set a precedent for you, many people will not see machinery, they will see McHenry because of what was in the prior terms, right? Same thing with folk, croak, soak, vitamin A. People don't think, you go on automatic processing, right? Perceptions of what you think you are supposed to see is what emerges. You are primed and influenced to see and determine subsequent information based on prior information. That's why I keep harping on the media. They are very important in this dynamic, as is our education system that primes us in certain ways that work at cross purposes to people understanding and perceiving the messaging that we're trying to give related to reparations. So I asked you to just go ahead and say it.
Science.
It's not science. You filled in the blank.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So again, you know, what we see is not necessarily what's actually there. So this has real life consequences when we start looking at things like that situation that happened at my alma mater. A Black Yale graduate student fell asleep in her dorm's common room. Remember this? And a white student called the police. Why? Because she's been set up with prior information and experience that says Black people aren't smart enough to go to Yale. Black people can't afford to go to Yale. Black people are in the minority, almost non-existent at Yale. And so if I see a Black person at Yale, they must be the things that Black people are: criminals, you know, unhoused, et cetera, et cetera. So the Washington Post did this article that was kind of interesting. They said, at some point, it's like, there's nothing we can do to be really seen. We're going to be understood and perceived in relationship to people's expectations and prior experiences, so that at the end of the day, they said we can now add napping to the long list of things that are unacceptable to do while Black. Couponing while Black, graduating with too much enthusiasm while Black, waiting for a school bus, but all of these are actual situations, right? Getting locked out of your own home. That was my professor. He was my advisor in undergrad. Gates, going to the gym while Black, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And again, priming is really important here. Priming is the activation, often unconscious, of certain associations that predispose our perception, our memory, and our response. For example, if I want you to think a certain way about something, I will prime you with things to lead you down a particular road, so that when you see the thing that is really of interest, you are going to see it based on how I have set you up to see it, not seeing what's actually there, right? You actually have been led to a conclusion by outside forces and information and imagery and words. And so we saw that in the media, for example, here with the Associated Press and the AFP reporting on Katrina. Same day, you know, same issue, same behavior. Only difference, in one scenario, you're Black, and the other, you're white. In the Black scenario, you are chest deep in flood water after after looting a grocery store, right? Here, the two white folks wading through chest deep water after finding bread and soda. This is why we have so much problems getting the general public, and not just white people, but other racial groups, to understand reparations. And you see it again when it comes to criminalizing Black folk. Same crime. 3 white students, college students, arrested, burglary charges pending. And in this instance, 4 Black men, here they are arrested for burglary. Here, burglary charges are pending. So the words matter, and then the images matter. Their pictures are them in their high school graduation pictures or their college pictures. The brothers, it's their mugshot, right? So we have to understand that priming is getting in.
They humanized the Iowa folk. They were the University of Iowa wrestlers, as opposed to just arrest for the Black folk.
Right, exactly. These are people, these are not, right? So one other thing that I wanted to mention is what we call inattentional blindness and change blindness. Inattentional blindness is failing to see visible objects when our attention is directed elsewhere. So here's a quick clip that I use in my intro psych class. So I want everybody can do this, but again, and Nikichi, you're going to be my subject, okay? So I want you to count the number of times the ball is passed between two groups of players, okay? So you'll see the clip was going to instruct you.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
You got to focus on the team in white and focus on the team in black and watch the ball. Count how many times the ball is passed.
Oh, it's a lot of times.
Watch the ball. Don't lose sight of the ball. Okay? So how many times?
It just looked like more times with the people in the white shirts, but I couldn't, I don't play ball well. I mean,
that's okay.
At basketball, I don't know. I'm not sure. But I could see the people in the white shirts better.
Okay.
At anything.
Most people don't get it. So you would not be an outlier if you did not get the right answer.
Answer is 13.
13 times they passed the ball.
But
who? There
did
were
you
two
see
balls,
the moonwalking bear?
Wait. Okay, so you just missed an important piece.
Moonwalking bear?
Did you see the moonwalking bear?
A bear? No, I didn't see a bear.
Okay, why?
Go!
That bear that just moonwalked up in there?
I missed it. I don't know.
You still didn't see it?
No.
Okay, look.
A real bear?
No, not a real bear. Someone dressed up as a bear.
Well, I didn't see that either. Okay, wait a minute. Someone
right there?
Oh, yeah, well, he was dressed in all black. I couldn't tell. Yeah.
Right? But
they all looked alike.
There have been a number of studies that have actually repeated this, not just in the United States. There's a clearer one I should have used where it was done in the UK, and it's a group of white folks at a bar, and they totally missed the moonwalking bear. So this is an example of inattentional blindness. So you fail to see something that's right there in your visual field when your attention is being redirected. How much is the redirecting, the attempt to redirect us in the movement, getting in our way of seeing opportunities to actually advance our efforts for reparations because of inattentional blindness? That's just the basic question. There's also emotion-induced blindness, right? Where you have emotional visual scenes that are powerful attractors of your attention that can disrupt perception of other stimuli that appear soon after. So in this particular study, they would show people images, right? And so in some instances, they would just show like images of, scenery. And then they would ask people questions, or they would follow an imagery scene with something that's like this critical distractor. And then they would show these scenes again later. And what would happen is that people would have a different kind of reaction to the target image. They could or could not remember it based on whether or not there was a distractor put in their way that caused an emotional reaction. So again, how do emotional reactions or emotional staging of our engagement with one another and our engagement with the general public getting in the way of people seeing what it is we're trying to do. Here's another. So there's also what we call inattentional blindness. And by the way, that before I forget it, with that change blindness, going back to that, sometimes we will we'll see something. And this was, I didn't put the slide up for this, but there've been studies where you come up to a counter and you're asking someone for help with something, and they say, "Oh, wait a minute," and I dropped my pen, and they reach down below the counter so you can no longer see them, and then they come back up, and it's a different person. They may have on different color clothing, their hairstyle may be different, etc. And the person who's at the counter doesn't even notice that it's somebody else who is now standing in front of them. And that change blindness means that we don't notice changes in the environment because we're expecting otherwise. Like when somebody goes under, the counter and comes back up, we're not expecting to see a different person, so we don't see the change. And both inattentional and change blindness have implications. That influences things like expert witness testimonies validity, the behavior of police officers and security guards, how teachers act in the classroom, and how they, demonstrate implicit bias. And then we have inattentional blindness. That's the failure to notice something, again, simply because your attention was focused elsewhere. So let me engage everyone to watch this very short clip. Oh no, the clip is blocked. I'm sorry. In this clip of whodunit, if you look it up in YouTube clips, you'll find it. It's like maybe 2 minutes long, if that. And they're trying to figure out who killed this guy here. And they end up deciding it's this woman who was planting petunias. And they said she must be the one, because who plants petunias in that time of year? And so everybody was trying to focus on who did it. And while you're focused on listening to the narration about who did it and people's reactions to being potentially pointed out as a potential perpetrator, everybody totally missed the fact that 21 things in the scene changed. The flowers on the table, the tablecloth, the position that the man is lying on the floor, the presence of this thing here, the rug, all kinds of things. 21 different things changed. Most people saw none of it. Again, it's because of this change blindness. So it's easy to miss something you're not looking for. We end up focusing on and making meaning based on what's been called, what has or has not been called out, and our implicit and explicit ways of thinking shape our behaviors toward and our views toward and about other people, especially people who are different from us. And we end up sometimes with another kind of blind spot, and it's called psychological blind spots, which is a lack of insight or awareness, and it's often persistent, about a specific area of your own behavior or your personality, typically because recognition of your true feelings and motives would be too painful to accept, right? This actually, if we get into this area, helps us understand the resistance to some extent that we observe among some non-Black racial groups when it comes to seeing their racial biases, stereotypes, or discriminatory behaviors. You see it to some extent described in a study done by Knowles and colleagues. And in this study, it was looking at a model of white identity management. And it posed the question, what will white people do when faced with this question about racism? And some white people will deny it. Some people will distance themselves from it, and others will dismantle. But it's really only a small group that will actually dismantle. So you have the group of deniers. They reject the notion that their race affords them any unearned privileges, and they won't go any further with that. There's another group who will downplay the importance of their whiteness to the self. And so they just distance themselves and they say, there's no racism. And then that third group says, you know what, there's a there. I need to understand it and I need to be part of the solution. And then they will work toward dismantling racism. Their choice of strategy shapes their concern for racial inequities and a commitment to measures that could reduce it. And why is this? First of all, they're coping strategies for living with privilege in what we can assume to be a meritocratic and democratic society. We think that you do and accomplish what you do and accomplish because of what you yourself have done and the opportunities afforded to everyone. And then there's also the problem of acknowledging privilege, facing the double predicament, taking the blame for failures and giving up credit for success, right? And then there's the protection of self-image that triggers the denial of white privilege. And Knowles found that distancing from whiteness is actually associated with colorblind ideology, the denial of racial privilege, and the opposition to affirmative action. So as I begin to wrap this up, there's also the impact of the context and how context affects our perception. How information is valued or judged is influenced by the context within which the information is provided. So, Nkechi, you're my subject again. Which of these two girls looks bigger? Which of the two girls looks bigger?
The Black girl.
The Black girl. The truth of the matter is they're both exactly the same height. But if I alter the background, in other words, if I shape the context, I can create the illusion. Now, this has very real consequences. Again, if you look at some of the research, for example, by Philippa Goff, who talked about the fact that Black children are not seen as children, they're adultified, that Black children don't have the benefit of what adults give to children, which is when you see a child, you feel compelled to protect them and you feel compelled to see their innocence. Neither of those happens as a general rule from some of their research for Black children. And then there was other research that was done by some brother sociologists who talked about, how Black children are seen as bigger than their actual physical size, right? Because the backdrop or the context that we've been, fed is that we are menacing, we are a threat, we are a danger. And then you got to make sense of that. So they must be really big in order to be as threatening as they are. How else would you put a kindergartner in handcuffs? A kindergartner in handcuffs makes no sense. And then if you look at these two, in the center dot, which dot looks bigger or larger? This one or this one?
The one with that one. Yeah.
This one on the right.
Yeah, correct.
Exactly. Both of these dots are exactly the same size. But if I change the context around them, I can give you a very different image or perception of what's in fact going on. So context has an effect on perception. The same physical stimulus can be interpreted differently, and we use other cues in the situation to resolve the ambiguities. And then there's the effect of emotion and physical state and motivation on our perception, right? So experiments have shown that destinations seem farther when you're tired. A target looks farther when your crossbow is heavier, right? A hill looks steeper with a heavy backpack, or after you listen to sad music or you're walking alone. Something you desire looks closer. So these are some of the things that we need to understand. And I'll wrap it up by simply sharing that we have all kinds of errors in judgment that are also impacting the reparations efforts that we are dealing with, and those errors include things like the confirmation bias, a tendency to search for information that supports your preconceptions about something and to ignore or distort contradictory evidence, right? And we'll overestimate the accuracy of our knowledge and our judgments, and we often will grossly overestimate it. So this confirmation bias thing is very, very important, and it is at play. I have seen it at play, and all I have to do is watch Fox News to appreciate how it is at play. And this confirmation bias cements the available information that we have. It creates literally places in our brain, we call them schemas, that quickly help you to say, oh, that's a Black person, which means boom, 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 boom. Oh, they're talking about reparations. That means boom, 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 and boom, right? There's also what we call the fundamental attribution error. That's the tendency for someone who's observing someone else to analyze that person's behavior, where they will underestimate the impact of the situation and overestimate the impact of personal disposition. That happens all day long when it comes to Black people. Why we are unhoused, why we are over incarcerated, why we have the educational attainment that we have, why we don't have the wealth that we don't have. It's that, the explanations, many of them fall right under that fundamental attribution error. And then there's belief perseverance. Once you think you know something, you hold on to it for dear life. You cling to those beliefs in the face of contrary evidence, right? And that often fuels social conflict. So this one should be familiar. Think about Trump supporters. They exhibit belief perseverance as they cling to their initial conceptions of Trump. In spite of the new evidence about his character, his behavior, and maybe even his intentions, they're still rock solid behind him, right? Belief perseverance. They will not let new information in. There's techniques of persuasion that I don't have time to go into, but we need to bring that into our discussion. Social psychology has studied persuasion techniques. Earlier, when I talked about, having some healing circles to kind of help white folks, let's say, unpack racial biases, that can't be done with, it could, but it's not going to be as effective if it's a Black person trying to lead white folks through that process. The persuasion is considered more credible when it's somebody from your in-group, right? And so that's why we need to make sure that we're understanding when we're trying to convince people about the rightness of reparations and the approaches. How are we using basic techniques in persuasion? And our folks in communications understands this. Folks in marketing understand this. Are we availing ourselves of the talent pool we have in marketing and in communications and media to up the ante on our persuasion techniques? I think I'll stop there. And basically what I've taken you through is not even the most complicated features of psychology. I just took you through some of the tidbits of a general psychology, introduction to psychology class. I teach it. I'm teaching it right now. So this stuff is very present on my mind, but it's very present on my mind, not just because I'm teaching it to the students, but because I'm seeing how it's playing itself out in the reparations movement, but that we are not paying attention to these. So we have to understand these things. We have to understand and appreciate and respect the level of distress that we have been put under as Black folk and how that influences all of those dynamics, and realize that the struggle to just be is a source of stress for us. The struggle, I'm going to say that again, the struggle to just be is a source of stress. And that stress, if you go back to what I talked about earlier, when we're stressed, we actually short circuit the most valuable thing that we have going for us from our cultural tradition. And that is our ability to connect with each other.
Mm.
That has saved us through, that has gotten us through, that has pulled us over in so many ways across generations. But when I'm severely stressed, the last thing I'm going to be able to do effectively is connect with you, right? Just by the nature of how stress operates on our brain and on our physical body. And then you add epigenetics to that, and oh my God, and you add, that what I talked about, allostatic overload. And to me, it's a marvel that we have not gone stark raving mad as Black people. In fact, there's a lot to learn from us, and we need to learn from us. But we need to learn that by being very, very strategic in going through our history and understanding, how did we pull that off? What strategies, tactics, and tools did we use? What was the cultural grounding of it? And then extract that lesson and figure out not 100% identical application, but how to apply that in our current context in 2023. So I'll stop there.
Wow. Dr. Grills, you have truly taught us and given us a lesson and given us so very much food for thought. We will have this as a video available to everyone. I'm going to let Jim close this out, but I really appreciate it. We had over 100 people. Now we have about 50 people on. I'm just saying. I was inviting people to go in and leave right at 8:30, but half of the folks stayed anyway, because the information that you're sharing is so very valuable and so very applicable to what we are seeing right here, right now, as we are engaged in the history in the making of reparations. So Jam, why don't you go in and close us out?
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Grills. We learned so much, and we appreciate you taking the time to give this, even though you were traveling at the time. So everyone, we got multiple questions. I'm sorry that we couldn't answer all of them. Hopefully some of the questions were answered during Dr. Grills' presentation. And also, a lot of people asked about the video. The video will be published on YouTube, and we're going to email it out to all the attendees. And we'll also send a new registration link for the next Reparation Information Thought Series. So be on the lookout for that. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and have a good night. You're muted, Nikichi.
I just said reparations now.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.